Welcome. You're listening to the Good Girls Don't podcast with Ashley Ray
and Verity Mansfield.
This is the podcast where we smash those rules that we've been taught to follow both as men and women and burn the damn rule book. We're tackling the big issues and the issues nobody wants to talk about, and we'll be fiercely feminist about it.
This podcast is about inspiration, education, compassion, and being the change that you need to see in this world. This podcast is for the trailblazers, the freedom fighters, and the soul igniters, and all the women just like you who are ready to break the good girl rules and be heard.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of Australia and its First Nations people on which this podcast is produced and consumed. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Get ready for the revolution. It's coming to you now. It's coming to you now. We're gonna sing an evolution. And they'll never bring us down. No, they'll never bring us down.
Verity, we are talking about something I would not have given a second thought to today.
Ooh, what's that?
We are talking about voluntourism. That's tourism like travel tourism, with Sally Hetherington OAM, which I learned recently thanks to Bettina Arndt, stands for Order of the Medal of Australia.
That's so cool.
It is very cool. I want to tell you about Sally because she's a very impressive human being. She's the founder and CEO of Human and Hope Association Incorporated Australia. And at the age of 25, Sally bought a one-way ticket to Siem Reap, Cambodia, with the goal of helping people living in poverty. A few months into her journey in Cambodia, Sally realized that the sustainable development of a community can't be achieved through the involvement of short-term foreign volunteers. This realization led Sally to transform a community centre that was reliant on foreign volunteers into a locally run NGO registered organisation, Human and Hope Association Cambodia.
And it really is an important conversation because so many of, there is this passage of rights for Australians, especially when they finish high school, to go out into the world to travel and to get some, experience. And a lot do volunteer work, and they go to other countries and, help teach English. I can't even say that. And it's really one of these things I think we really need to look at, because we don't often understand the impact that we have in these countries and the damage we can actually leave behind while believing that we're doing, charitable, noble work.
Yes, I really think about it as like stroking our white privilege.
Yeah.
And I found it really interesting because I'm formerly from the travel industry. So hearing what Sally had to say really has made me think very long and hard about the experiences I had working as a travel agent and what is really pushed in that industry. It was just really fascinating. I mean, we got to talk about some stuff. I genuinely think this is something we don't give thought to on a regular basis.
We really don't. I think sometimes as well, like I believe in the best in people, and I think we want to be of service and we want to make the world a better place, but we don't realize that we have been doing it in a very destructive, disempowering manner that actually keeps the cycle of poverty in place. And, some of the things that we did talk about as well was the danger of unskilled volunteers, especially if there's been like a massive natural disaster, like with the tsunami that went through Thailand. You have masses of untrained people turning up that can be more of a hindrance than a help. Of why skilled, even when they're skilled volunteers, that go into different countries and utilize their skills, bring their knowledge and their skills over, but they actually end up replacing the skilled people of that country. So Sally was saying that, we have, skilled Australian volunteers going over, but they're making skilled Cambodians redundant. And that just creates more poverty and more disempowerment in a community that so desperately needs it. Or our impact on the children at risk and how volunteering voluntourism, as we're talking about, can add to this lack of stability for these children and actually impacts their attachment issues and creates more problem or triggers more abandonment issues for these children who've already lost so much. Or even how empowering women creates an intergenerational increase in education, allowing more women to rise, more children to rise, reducing domestic violence, and actually engages more children into education systems, which is so powerful. And that's what I love about Sally's work. She enables people to find that middle ground where they can be a part of, they can still travel, but they do it on such an ethical way. It empowers these communities without leaving any damage.
Yes, and we also spoke about, the power of language, specifically the term third world. That was a big one for both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation that's going to make you think very differently about how we travel. And I would encourage you, if you have children at school, especially high schools, who are engaging in programs like this, where they travel to another country to build a school or a well or a house, think twice. Listen to this episode and start a dialogue with your schools.
Yeah, and just see where your ethics stand in this process, and actually how maybe you can create a better way that allows your children, allows yourself to actually show up in these other countries with really beautiful intentions and without actually leaving any damage behind.
Yes, so please stay tuned, because this is a very important conversation, as they all are on this podcast that we have coming up for you in just a moment. Welcome to the podcast, Sally. You're here to talk to us today about voluntourism. And before we dive into all of the juiciness that we have and all of the really delicious questions we have to ask you, are you able to share with us what voluntourism actually is for those who don't know?
Definitely. So voluntourism is short-term foreign volunteering overseas. So think about it when the 16-year-olds go and on these service learning trips and they build houses, or they volunteer in orphanages, or they help teach English, and it's for a few days or a few weeks at a time. That's voluntourism.
Okay. So I can definitely think of a lot of schools I know that have programs like that, and unis and
Yeah,
all of
my
that.
younger sister did it through a private school, Penrose College in Perth, and they sent the kids over to Tanzania, I think for a week. And they spent 2 years fundraising. Yeah, they spent 2 years fundraising for the trip. They took 30 kids over to Tanzania. They helped build, I think, wells and things like that. And they were there for a good week or 2 weeks, I think. And then when they came back, they did this whole night where the parents all had to pay money to attend. And they took a video team with them. So they made this great documentary of the trip that the kids had done and how they'd contributed. And they obviously had photographed and documented the trip. And then the parents could buy the photos, of their kids afterwards. But I'm pretty sure the money went back into the project. I hope it went back into the project and to the people in Tanzania. But it was about fundraising the money there. And my sister had this really great sense of self from it. And my parents, funny enough, they're not big on having photos in their houses, but this one photo of my sister in Tanzania they have framed, and probably because they paid a few $100s for it. And it was always this really beautiful thing that my sister had done, but it always does leave behind for me this feeling of, how many, I guess, white privileged people are traipsing through these people's lives, and how that actually does impact them. And we walk away with this great feeling like, oh, we've contributed, we've
Done our bit for the world.
And there's almost a sense of pity or a sense of charity. But it's how is it actually impacting these communities? Is it as brilliant as what we think it is, or is there a dark side to it?
There's definitely a dark side to it.
We love to dive into this. Tell us about the dark side, because again, it's marketed as this beautiful, wonderful thing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there is an underbelly.
It is, and there's
Definitely.
great marketing. Like, I wish that I was as good at marketing as these voluntourism companies are. So there's a lot of issues with it. And I'll start by saying I was a voluntourist. In 2010, I went to Cambodia for a month, and I can't even really remember what I did, except for like teaching the kids the hoedown, throwdown from the Hannah Montana movie, which I do love. You know, everybody's life is obviously impacted really well if they learn how to do that. But I don't really know what I did.
It's an essential life skill.
It is a central life skill, yes. And so what I then did was come back to Australia, and I thought, this is amazing. I did such a good job, even though I can't remember what I did. I had such a good impact on these poor Cambodian kids. Let me go back, which is why I took a career break. I moved back and I was working as a volunteer coordinator. So I was managing these short-term volunteers. And it was then that I realized the dark side to it. So, for example, these volunteers were coming in and teaching English to the kids, even though they had qualified Cambodian teachers who were university educated, and they could do it themselves and they were there to work. But then the other volunteers would come in and sort of take over, and they would be working with vulnerable children. So if you can imagine having vulnerable children and then having different people come in and out of their lives every month, it was just this revolving door, and that actually adds to vulnerability, and then that was causing attachment issues. It was just all these sorts of issues attached with it. So the local staff were disempowered, children had attachment issues, and there was no long-term sustainability, because we were trying to, the message that it was sending was that the community couldn't develop without the input of these foreign volunteers, when that was so not wrong. Because what I realized was that the local people are the subject matter experts, they know the community and the culture well, and they are there for the long term. So they're the ones who should be running their own organizations. And there is a lot of other dark underbelly when it comes to voluntourism, but that was my specific personal experience that made me go, aha, I've screwed up. Let me try and change my ways.
I've got questions.
So
many
actually, no questions.
No questions allowed.
So I'm formerly from the travel industry as well, and I know exactly the kind of marketing you're talking about, because it is pushed on travel agents to sell these trips, because it's like the one bit of like positive tourism you can sell that's touted as like not as bad as, you know, a luxury cruise ship kind of thing. But I'm really curious, when you're talking about the vulnerability of the children, first of all, I have this idea in my head, and I don't know that this is accurate, so please tell me if I'm really off base here. But I'm imagining that these are children coming from extreme backgrounds of poverty and possibly quite a lot of trauma and exploitation. I'm imagining having like a rotating roster of actually, it's not even a rotating roster, it's just different people coming in all the time. Like, I get annoyed and upset if I have to change therapists, and that's like once every 2 or 3 years maybe.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just imagining the impact that can have on these kids. I suppose there's not really a question in there, but just like, wow.
Yeah, and you're right. Every individual is different, and they've all got these backgrounds that you can't even begin to imagine. And due to privacy, the volunteers shouldn't know about those backgrounds, honestly, because I wouldn't know what you're talking about in therapy. And the same thing goes with these children as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, the foreigners, and I did this myself, I am just as guilty, which is why I can proudly say that I've changed my ways, but I was one of the ones who did it wrong. Please learn from me. And I would push my Australian way, my Western way on there. But this is a culture that goes back for a very long time, much longer than the white Australian culture. And so they have their way of doing things, and we need to respect that. And sure, there were a lot of times when I did challenge, okay, what do I respect and accept, and what do I try and challenge, especially when it came to gender equality. But when it came to local people being the best ones to run their own community centres, to develop their own community, I'm very set in stone about that. It needs to be the local people. And foreigners can help in different ways, which we can go into later, but this voluntourism, it does have to stop.
So I'm curious as well. I've heard 2 different sides to the voluntourism thing. I'm curious what you think. Is the issue that the people are coming over there are unskilled as well? Does that play into it?
Yes, for some of them, they're unskilled. There are some people who go over there short term who might have skills, but the thing is, so do the Cambodian people. So again, it's saying, oh, because I am coming from a high income country, I do know better than you, when we should be respecting and learning from the Cambodian people because they are so resilient and resourceful. They overcame a genocide that killed a quarter of the population, and they've rebuilt their country from that. We could learn so much from them, but it comes in that we are trying to push, and by we, I don't mean everybody, obviously, but some people are just trying to push their agenda on others, and that's not cool. We need to be learning from Cambodians and from people in other low-income countries and thinking, how can we help you? What do you need? And what they don't need is for us to go into a classroom for a day and teach English, or us to fundraise to bring over stuffed toys to give to the kids. That's not going to be what's going to help them in the long term and move them out of poverty.
Wow.
How much of it as well, just out of curiosity, is, I guess part of it our own ego, where, are we using this voluntourism as a way of entertainment to make our lives have more meaning to our, life, our white lives, in terms of going over there and almost like, and I don't mean this in any derogatory sense, but just so the audience can kind of understand this perspective of, we go to the zoo and we see animals that are caged and there's not really any way out, and they're totally dependent upon people coming to the zoo, giving donations, providing them with food, helping, to donate money to create, better shelters for them. And are we kind of treating these human beings almost the same, this kind of, very unempathetic state of where we're going there, one, to make ourselves feel better, and to make them rely on us so that we can feel better about ourselves, instead of, like you said, going there to understand, going there to learn off them, going there to have compassion and, contribute in a way that actually, like you're saying, empowers them. Instead of using it almost as some form of entertainment, because our lives themselves are kind of empty in our typical day-to-day society.
Yeah, well, when I went there as a volunteerist, I had like 1,000 photos of me and cute kids and me holding cute kids. Please don't go over and hold strange kids. I've learned my lesson on that. You wouldn't want someone coming up to your kids on the street.
It's very weird.
And yeah, and definitely it made me feel good, and it did give me that sense of meaning and purpose. But at the end of the day, after I stopped being a volunteer coordinator and I went and I built up a community centre with a local team of Cambodians, always with the purpose of making myself redundant. So that meant no foreign staff, no foreign volunteers.
I love that.
Yeah,
the purpose of being redundant.
Yeah, and I miss them so much. But it's not about me, it's what's best for that community. And you have to sometimes realize, hey, you know what, I should feel really happy that they don't need me anymore. So yeah, in Australia, I do fundraising for the community centre, but they also do fundraising in Cambodia, and they run all their programs because they're the ones who are there long term and they know what works and what doesn't work. And their staff, the only reason that the staff leave that organisation is because they get married and move to other provinces. And that actually happens to be men getting married and moving to other provinces, whereas usually it's the female expected to move. So they've got really good values there. But
I love that.
Yeah, they feel so invested in their jobs because when they see 90% of students passing the English exams, which are quite tough, they say, hey, that was us. We did that. We own that. And that's that sense of empowerment. Exactly. It's really important.
It wasn't given to us. We worked for it. We created it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's actually really a much more beautiful way, isn't it? And I think when I was at uni 20 odd years ago, and it was then called Aboriginal Studies. I'm sure they've probably renamed it now, but it was very, very interesting. There was this same conversation of why and this is, like 2 odd decades ago. I'm sure there's things happening now and have happened since, but why we're not teaching, Indigenous people to support and to empower each other. Like, you know, we go in there and we're kind of like, oh, you should listen to us. We know what to do. And we don't. And there's almost this arrogance of thinking that we've got all of the solutions to the problems. And yet, I'm sorry, but even our own societies are riddled with problems. So I don't know what on earth makes us think that we're even qualified to go into another culture and be like, hey, you should see what we did.
Definitely, and there are voluntourism opportunities available to go to Indigenous communities in Australia, and I'm ashamed that happens, because there are so many amazing Indigenous leaders who can develop their own communities, and there just needs to be more funding available there for them to do that, you know?
You know, I've always seen those, and I have always had that crawling out of my own skin kind of feeling when I see them, but I've never been able to put it into words why, and I think you've just done it.
Thank you. Yeah, like, I don't want to condemn people if you have participated in voluntourism, because I did that too, but we just need to think and change our perspective and delve deeper into the subject matter. You know, it's good intentions and not good enough. And honestly, if you go to a country and you inadvertently disempower a local staff member or someone in the community, they actually might not try again. We have seen that happen in our community. And then that means that for the rest of their lives, they're going to be living in poverty. And you, of course, wouldn't want that, because you're there to try and help them. So we really just need to be very careful, making sure that we're actually supporting the locals to be working with the local community.
I'm so curious to ask about, you know, you said that you've made yourself redundant. What was the transition like from having that sort of awakening, going, oh shit, this is not working and not okay, to they're now pretty much like all self-sufficient, bar the little bit of fundraising that you do here? What was that sort of transition period like? I mean, was the community really like, yes, thank God, finally?
Get rid of her, that idiot. Yeah, probably. So from the beginning, so that organisation I originally worked for, I left them and I started to work at this. It was just a nightly English school at the time, but what I really loved was that it was Cambodians who had said, hey, there's a lack of education in our community. What can we do about it? Let's volunteer our time to teach 2 hours an evening. And so I thought, hey, that's the way forward. So when I joined up with them and we agreed, hey, we'll build us up into a reputable community centre with full-time staff, that it was always there would be no more foreign volunteers and that I would make myself redundant. So we always had that end goal. And that's why we were so successful, because there are so many organisations in Cambodia and all around the world that are dependent on funds, especially from foreign volunteers who either have to fundraise to come and stay with them, or they might fundraise after they've left. And so for them, it's really difficult to move out of that place that they're in, or it's so ingrained in their culture that they don't know anything else other than, okay, we need foreign volunteers. But for us, it was always like, no, we have to make sure to develop ourselves, but also make sure that any knowledge that the staff get is passed on to other staff. So if any of those local staff leave, that knowledge doesn't leave the organisation. And that's what happens actually when, especially, there are some great long-term volunteers who go to different countries because they're skilled, they have a specific project and they need to train a staff member. The thing is, when the staff member that they train leaves, so does all that knowledge, and that year of work leaves as well. So that's why succession planning within the organisation is so important. So like in 2015, we had 2 of our local managers leave at the same time to actually, they felt so empowered, they went and set up their own English school.
Mission accomplished.
But we were able to promote from within, and that was amazing, and none of that knowledge was lost.
I mean, that's beautiful. That is really incredible.
Thank you.
But it's also as well having, people that are coming in, at lower levels in Cambodia, their role models are going to be their own people.
Mm-hmm.
And that is powerful. And I think Ashley and I have talked about this before, where even just as women in society, we're surrounded by men, male role models, taking up most of the screen, taking up most of the awards in science and arts and maths and everything else.
We were
and it's
talking
kind of
about
like,
the
well, where do we
statue
find
crisis the other day.
yeah, the statue crisis. You know, it's like 3% of statues in any major capital city are female.
We have more statues of prawns and bananas than women
That's
in
in this
terrible.
Australia.
country.
That's right. Yeah, there's more statues of animals in Australia than there are of women. And so, you know, we are growing up in a society, we're becoming really aware that there's this lack of role models just for women. Yet you kind of think, well, you know, with all of this voluntourism that's been going on, that must have been taking away from these cultures having their own role models to look up to and to follow and to listen to, and that wisdom to be passed on within their community, which empowers an entire community, not just one person.
Definitely. And, you know, so one of the programs we have is a sewing program. So there have been 3 men in the program in the last 7 years, but it's mostly women because women tend to be more illiterate than men. It's 1 in 5 men over the age of 15 are illiterate compared to 1 in 4 women in Cambodia. So that's why, because they have to drop out of school first because they have to take care of the family, etc., etc. So this program's aimed at women, and it was really hard for the longest time because the women were forced to stop by their husbands or their fathers because they would say, no, you have to be at home with the family, you can't study part-time. They didn't see that the investment in these women's skills would actually help the whole family out of poverty. And that program has actually reduced domestic violence, it's increased income, it's taken, I think, 29 families out of poverty. It also improves the chance of the kids staying in school because it's this whole thing of getting the income, but also showing that education is the key to moving out of poverty. And so nowadays what happens is to recruit the more students from the community, the actual sewing graduates are going out to the community, and we give them a salary, of course, and they're going and showing how they've been able to break free of poverty and how much more confident they are and that they can participate in community matters and meetings and stand up for themselves and their community. And that's what's getting more women into the program is those local women are now the role models. So it's this really great full circle effect.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's when we hear someone else's story and they've stood in our shoes and they've been able to break through a barrier that makes us go, that could be me. I could do that. But if it's just someone coming in from another country who's got a whole different experience, a whole different set of resources than you've ever been entitled to, you're not inspired or motivated. There's no belief that that could be you because then they don't even have the same story, the same background. Like there's nothing in common.
Exactly, because, and even though that's not the case in Australia, but a lot of people in Cambodia do assume because you are from Australia, you're automatically rich. And I mean, I suppose in most cases you do have more money compared to Cambodians, but it's still this perception that they have. So of course they can't relate to you because automatically it's, hey, you're higher than me.
Yeah, I've worked in China before through business, and it was really interesting afterwards speaking with the factory girls, and we'd be at dinners, and I just made a comment about going into my daughter's bedroom, and they'd seen me snipe my daughter. She was 3 at the time, and so they'd all come in and wave to her on Skype during the day. And at night time, when they're asking me about my daughter and I'm talking to them about their daughters and, children, and I just made the comment that I'd gone into my daughter's bedroom at night, to check on her or because something happened. And they stopped me and they said, your daughter's bedroom? And I said, yeah. And they said, what do you mean your daughter has a bedroom? And these were factory girls that were, they were dressed brilliantly. They had the latest haircuts. They lived in apartments in cities. They had better clothes than what we had. But just the cultural difference to them, they, often have a 2-bedroom apartment and, the parents and children in one room and grandparents are in another room. And so she said to me, you must be really rich if your 3-year-old daughter has her own bedroom. And I'm like, I am so not rich. It's not funny. I struggle in Australia, but, at the time, and it was just a really interesting comparison to different perceptions and what really is wealth. And, we do have a wealthy country and we do have a lot of resources here. And, even the fact that a couple of years ago, we got paid to have children by the government, where
Mm.
in China you had to pay the government. I think she said it was about 10,000 US dollars to be able to have a second child. And it wasn't that you couldn't have a second child, you could, but it just wouldn't be registered by the government. So no birth certificate, no identity, no education, no medical help.
Wow.
So
It's not that you can't. We're just going to assume that they're an alien.
they just,
Yeah.
they just don't exist. So yeah, it was just really fascinating. And I think sometimes we forget where we've come from, and while we want to go and be helpful and contribute,
Mhm.
we're so unaware of what their needs are.
Definitely. And I say that the best way that you can support people in countries like Cambodia is be an ethical traveler, because that means that you can still see the country, you can still learn from the people, but don't go and volunteer, and don't participate in poverty tourism, which is going into the slums, and because you're going into people's homes. Imagine if you were having a shower here and somebody walks in and takes photos of you. That happens in Cambodia because people are out there and their showers are outside of their houses, and it's not ethical, it's not right. So instead, let's turn the tables, and if you become an ethical traveler, you can support social enterprises, because there are so many restaurants and hotels and shops that are social enterprises. So they train disadvantaged Cambodians, and then they get a new skill so then they can move out of poverty, and that's a way that you can benefit, and so can the social enterprises as well. And
I
when
love
you
this
go
so
there,
much.
there's so much. And then you can also your actions speak a lot. So don't go and take photos of kids. Don't go and give money or things to kids on the street, because that perpetuates that cycle of poverty, because those kids should be in school. And when them and their family see, hey, that person gave me $1, they're going to keep them out there day after day, week after week. And then what happens in a few years when that kid is no longer cute? They are forced into different terrible situations, which I won't speculate on, but there's a lot of implications from what we think might be good, which be to give that kid $1. One time I was at Angkor Wat. Yeah.
So
So
we're
one
literally
time,
teaching kids to earn money off the street
yeah, we
instead
are.
of off an education, off their internal resources.
Definitely. And there are like mafias, we call them, in Siem Reap. And that's when a kid will be with their little baby sibling, who sometimes isn't actually their sibling. They might have been rented, and they'll say, I don't want money, just buy me formula for my baby. Then they'll go into the little shop there, and they'll get the tourist to buy them formula, and the tourist goes away thinking, hey, that's good, I contributed by giving formula for the baby. But that kid who's holding the baby goes back in, resells it to that shop, they get half, the shopkeeper gets half, so they end up getting that cash anyway. So there's all these different things. And one time I was at Angkor Wat, which is an amazing temple in Cambodia, and my words just don't do it justice, obviously. And I saw there was a woman from another country, and she saw a kid who was begging, and she went to go give that kid $1, but she was posing for a photo at the same time, so her friend would be taking the photo, but then her friend wasn't ready to take the photo, so that woman took the money back and said, no, wait, to the kid, and waited then again until her friend was ready to take that photo. So that for her was, she was doing that so then she could look good, so then her friends
For
would then
own
say,
ego.
oh, it's so amazing. It's not right.
Yeah. Because that's just feeding our own ego and not really having any compassion or sincere desire to want to contribute to make the world a better place.
Definitely.
Oh my goodness. It just gives me the heebie-jeebies, like it's gross.
But it's also like almost using these communities for your own mental health. Like I know people who have, been dealing with depression, anxiety, and they go and travel to these, different countries and, help out, like doing the volunteerism and, voluntourism. And then they come back and they're like, oh, I just didn't feel anything when I was over there. It was so great. Like, my anxiety disappeared and my depression just, didn't even come up. And it's like, these people aren't your medication. These people aren't your therapy to make you feel better about yourself. It's actually energetically very dishonoring to go over to another culture and to use them to medicate yourself.
And it's like when people say, oh, third world problems. There is no third world. We need to stop referring to other countries as the third world. We are one world. We should be global citizens, and we should be showing that, thinking and knowing that everybody deserves quality education. Everyone deserves clean drinking water. Everyone deserves to be treated as respect. There's no us versus them. We are all human beings, and we need to be thinking and acting that way and not saying, oh, third world problems. It's just not on. We are better than that. We can do better than that. And the people in what we call low income countries, they deserve better than that.
Wow, that's such an incredible, yeah, because I think I don't know if I've ever used the word third world problems, but I've definitely looked at the world in terms of, first world and third world. And so, well, that's a third world country, which really is like what you've just said. I'm like, oh, I really need to rethink
like
that.
where's the second world, And I used to be guilty of it too. That's the popular thing to say. And you know what? Most people wouldn't realize how offensive it is. So but the more we know, the more we can change our habits. So like I said, I'm not here to slam people. Let's just open up your minds and be willing to learn. And if you can be willing to learn, you can make a difference.
That is so beautiful. And it is so important, isn't it? It's one of those things of not, what's the word? It's not criticizing people for how they have interacted, but just in terms of educating so we can all, move forward with a completely different way of thinking and,
be a little better.
Yeah. And just turn up in the world with a better frame of mind and a sense of how do we empower people instead of how do we stop disempowering them,
and learn from my mistakes. I've made my mistakes, and I'm very, very, very happy that I've rectified it to the best of my ability, and I continue to do that because I also continued to try and raise awareness in universities, because universities and schools are the most targeted by these voluntourism companies, and we need to try and make the change within. It's when I go to businesses, employees at the companies, the adults, they're much more willing to take on this change of opinion and change of perspective.
So how do we become an ethical traveler? Just like if you had some advice for the average person who wanted to go and explore another culture and so that they could expand their own awareness about the world, how can we do that? Like if I want to take my children overseas so they have an understanding of the greater world, how do we do that ethically?
So like I said, where possible, do your research to support social enterprises.
Yeah.
If you want to support non-profit organisations overseas, do your research. Make sure that you are supporting a good organisation, especially try and look for ones that are really run by local staff and support them with what they need, not what you think they want. So don't think, okay, let me go and gather some pencils and go give that to that organisation. They might not actually need that. So talk to them about their needs and what they want. Also try your best to support really locally. So go and, with kids it might be more difficult to eat at street side stalls because you might be worried about sickness, but really support those locally owned and run businesses so then the money gets to on the ground. Because it's like what you say in Australia, every time you buy from a small business, somebody does a happy dance because their kids' tuition is paid for, they get to go to soccer. All of that does make an impact. And just behave with respect, research the culture. So dress and act accordingly. So if a country like Cambodia says, cover up your knees and shoulders when you go to temples, do that. That shows that you respect that country. And, when we go to countries, we should just be respecting their culture, definitely. And of course, please don't participate in poverty tourism. Like I've mentioned before, everyone deserves respect.
I'm still tripping over that people taking photos of people showering, like that just is tripping me up so much because I just am picturing if I opened my shower curtain and there was someone standing there with a camera and it's freaking me out a bit to think about that and go, oh my God, imagine that on, not just one person, but 10 people who are part of a little tour passing through your town.
There's a really good blog on the website Learning Service, because they're trying to flip that narrative as well and say, don't go on those service learning trips. You've got to learn before you can serve. And there was this blog written by a Cambodian man, and he said that some volunteers came and built a house for his friend. And then when they came back a few months later, this guy felt entitled to go to the house and to take photos when this guy was in the shower and stuff, and it's not right. So I will actually send you some really good websites to look at, especially No White Saviors really focuses on countries in Africa as well, because there is a story that you can definitely look into, and it was about an American woman, and she went to, I feel it might have been Uganda, and she had no medical training, and she was actually doing medical work on kids, and the estimate was up to 100 children died as a result.
Oh,
And now she's
wow.
back in America being protected. And also some of these voluntourism companies, they do offer for unskilled volunteers to do non-invasive medical tests. I don't care if it's non-invasive. I do not want an unqualified person doing medical tests on me. And we can't just assume because these people can't afford medical care that they should accept the second best. Yeah.
That is so true. Absolutely.
I don't want someone who's got no idea about medicine doing my blood pressure. Like, I know it's a simple non-invasive thing, but you don't want them making comments or doing it wrong and then entering the wrong data. Like, more heebie-jeebies.
Exactly.
So what about sustainability? That comes a lot into the work that you do in terms of being able to teach these women to, and I'm assuming men as well, to create businesses. So what kind of businesses are they, or what are you helping them to create that sustainable in terms of being able to bring, money and resources in? Like, what kind of activities are they participating
in the sewing program, so there's a few different programs that Human and Hope runs, and the 12-month program is the sewing program. And the women, they study 3 hours a day for 12 months. And not only do they learn everything about sewing, but they also learn about chemical-free farming, because chemicals are a huge issue in food in Cambodia, which actually do cause a lot of deaths. So they can then also set up their own farms at home, because everybody has land, and make use of it so then they can improve the nutrition in their families or sell the vegetables to their community members. They learn about business skills. They also learn about life skills. So then at the end of the program, they have a support network of other women and they feel confident. They also have ongoing support from Human and Hope, who run refresher workshops for 6 months. They receive microfinance loans. They don't have to pay back the loan until 6 months after receiving that sewing machine, so they can feel confident and not feel pressured. And I think it's a $6 or $8 US interest rate on the whole sewing machine, and that program has a 100% repayment rate, because they feel so invested and indebted to HHA, because they really respect their teachers. And actually the sewing teachers at Human and Hope are graduates from the sewing program themselves. Can you believe it?
awesome.
It is really amazing. So they are also the role models to say, I've been exactly where you've been, and it's okay. There's definitely hope, just work hard. So at the end of the program, the participants, they either set up their own businesses at home, so that's to fix and repair clothing for their neighbours, or they are hired to make our handicrafts, such as produce bags, eco bags, bamboo straw sleeves, etc., which we sell in Cambodia and in Australia, if you check out hopeonpurpose.org. And also they will be hired to work in an ethical factory in Siem Reap that actually gives healthcare, staff lunches. It's a really good factory, or at shops in town. So there are different avenues that they can go down for employment.
Fantastic.
That's amazing. And I love that most of that stems from like the simple act of, okay, we need education. How do we do that? Well, and like, that's just amazing. I've heard it again and again that education is a way out of poverty, but it just never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah, especially when you understand the steps and what the opportunities really are for them, then you can start to really understand how empowering that really is compared to sending a kid, to sit on the street corner and hope that they get $1 a day.
Definitely. And then their children go and study at public school and then also do their supplementary classes at Human and Hope in preschool, English, their native language, do library. It's really powerful. And it actually only costs $1,100 Australian to put a woman through that 12-month program, which is so cheap when you consider that they earn more than that back in their first year of working after graduating.
And I mean, that's incredible. Mm-hmm. And I imagine like the intergenerational benefits of this, like bringing a woman in now, like this year in 2020, what that means for her children having a better future is just incredible. And what that means for that community 20 years from now is amazing and a bit mind-blowing.
Definitely. And that's why Human and Hope Association actually has an end date in Cambodia at that location, because a lot of charities just keep working, but you need to be trying to work towards a goal of making yourself redundant. So they won't take their whole community out of poverty, because each community member who is living in poverty needs to be willing to participate in the programs and give it their all. So it's not for everybody, but the goal is that by 2029, all of the families that willingly could take part in the program have taken part and have moved out of poverty. Because honestly, I don't think that we're ever going to solve the whole world, all of the poverty in the world, but I think that we can substantially reduce it. Yeah, we can try. I used to be that girl who wanted to save the world, but then I realized that, Sally, tone it down a bit, but that grassroots change is really effective, and we should be getting a lot more funding from governments and foundations for these grassroots organisations, because it has the staff who can treat everybody as an individual and work with them one-on-one, and that's just so effective and powerful.
I mean,
incredible.
I'm a little bit speechless at how amazing this is, because I also imagine, like you said, it's not everyone is going to participate in that program, but you get enough people in that it creates a really big sort of like a tidal effect, and it does lift everyone up. It does create a very different mindset for that community to operate in. And even the people who maybe can't or won't willingly participate, their lives are still going to be impacted in a really awesome way by it. I mean, their standard of living and all of the, it just might be easier for them to have their needs met and lift them out of poverty in different ways. And I think that's just, isn't it cool?
It is cool. And Cambodians have a real sense of community. It's funny because when I see people living in poverty in Cambodia, I don't get as sad as I do when I see it in Australia, because I know in Cambodia, the community will come together and give them a meal or take care of them, do something for them. Whereas I think that people are a lot more isolated in Australia. So that's why, yes, even if they don't participate in the programs in Cambodia, the people who will do have that income to then help them out a bit.
And that is the thing, isn't it? It's quite ironic to think that people here would feel they need to go and do one of these poverty tours to feel better about themselves when they could just walk into their own capital city.
Yeah, it's really depressing when I see the poverty and the homeless situation in Sydney. There's just so much more that we could do.
Amen to that.
And Sally, what as well about being a female in Cambodia? Like having created this really, or being a part of creating this really beautiful movement, how hard has that been as a female?
So it was challenging because in Cambodia, women are automatically born as second-class citizens. Like until 2007, there was this topic taught at public schools and it was called Chabab Sray, and that roughly translates to this proverb that men are gold and women are cloth. The former easily cleaned, the latter easily stained. So that's, women were taught that if they had issues at home, that had to stay at home. You couldn't speak out against violence or any of those issues. And so a lot of topics were taboo to talk about, and women were encouraged to be meek and quiet. And fortunately, that did stop in 2007, but a lot of women have grown up with that, and in some cases that does get passed on to their children. And so that was challenging to show, hey, I'm a female, you need to be working with me as someone in leadership position. And to begin with, it was mostly male staff that we had. It was really hard to get females to take on these roles. But now I'm really proud that actually 55% of the staff at Human and Hope are female.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And like male staff there, they are 100% behind female empowerment. And, you know, they treat everybody as equals, and they're all about empowering their female students and treating their wives with respect. And yeah, so like this, there is this shift. And like I said, it was hard for me because I had to think, what do I challenge? What do I respect in the culture, and what do I challenge? You have to be really careful, and change takes time. You know, I started telling my workmates about my period in 2013. They're like, don't talk about that. But then in 2016, when I suggested, hey, I found this resource and it's a book about periods in your language, how about we put that in the library? They were like, yep, let's do it. So, you know, 3 years later, they were really willing to actually put a resource about periods that the students could read in the library where anybody could see it. So it was a really nice shift. And they still do keep track of my period for me, which is really good.
I mean, that's just beautiful, isn't it? It's such a beautiful, I mean, I'm bowled over by that kind of change because it must be a beautiful thing to witness happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, tough and I'm sure at times really hard, but it must be incredibly rewarding to just see that change in the people that you work with and be like, oh, we can talk about this now, can we?
Definitely. And I'm so proud of them. And last year, actually, the education manager, he's one of the founders of HHA, so he's been there for 9 years. He actually won a Diana Award, and that's from the British organisation. It's in memory of Princess Diana. So that was a really big achievement for him to win that. Yeah.
That's really incredible. So where does most of the funding come from in order to support Hope on Purpose? Is that with the individual communities raising their own money, or is there a bigger fundraiser behind it?
So in Cambodia, they have some sustainable source of income. So they have a farm at Human and Hope, at which they sell the chemical-free vegetables to the villagers. They also have a successful sewing business, so that's doing wholesale orders for hotels and universities, and also selling really nice stuff on consignment in shops around town. And and they also do some grants income there. And in Australia, we do grants, events. So in April, we have our virtual walk to Cambodia, and that's where you try and walk as many steps as you can per day, and you log it online, and you get badges as you go through. And the aim is for us to collectively walk the distance from Australia to Cambodia. And we have social walks.
My legs hurt thinking about that.
It's 9.5 million steps, and you get your friends to sponsor you, because for every $120 raised, that is a child put through a year of quality education at Human and Hope.
For less than $200?
Yes, for 120, and it's tax deductible. So I encourage people to sign up for the walk to Cambodia. And we also have our ethical handicrafts that we sell here. We really like to partner with corporate so we can set up stalls in buildings around Sydney and Canberra. And we can actually raise a lot of money for that, and also raising awareness about thinking, who made what I'm buying? Let's not buy stuff where it's made in slave labor in a factory. Let's think about what's it achieving. And of course, we have our purpose and philanthropy field trips to Cambodia. So those are ethical tours. They last for a week, and the next one's in October. If anybody wants to know more, just check out hopeonpurpose.org.
That is amazing.
I'm really inspired.
Thank you.
But it's such a beautiful way as well, like to have that set up for you, so that instead of, like you were saying, having to go do the research and stuff, you are actually providing people with that service so they can automatically be an ethical traveller, and to learn and to do it in a very respectful way and an empowering way that you know, whatever footprint they leave behind is one that's actually going to help people and not take away from them.
Definitely. And when we do our purpose and philanthropy trips to Cambodia, the travellers actually have dinner with the team at Human and Hope. So they learn more about how amazing they are and they're inspired, and they come back to Australia and they're like, we get it why we should be supporting the salaries of local staff instead of going and volunteering ourselves. They know their stuff. They're the best people for their community.
That is incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I love this conversation because especially in Australia, there is almost this passage of right to go to another country, after high school and to do something.
Mhm.
And I think this is such an important conversation that needs to happen around every single dinner table, is how do we do that, but in a very ethical way? How do we do it with more consciousness? How do we do it with more awareness? How do we do it so that we know that we're empowering these communities that we trespass on instead of just barging in with all of our privilege and thinking, and our arrogance, and thinking that we know better, or they're like not equal to us. I mean, if someone came down my street and started taking photos of the houses on my street, I know pretty much half of my neighbours would be out there and probably calling the police on them.
Exactly.
It's not entertainment. Our lives don't exist for entertainment for somebody else.
And you wouldn't have a stranger go into your kid's school. But that's what happens in Cambodia. And that happened to us one day. Someone from Portugal came in, and I'd left for the day because we were originally located at a public pagoda. And they came into a classroom and said, I want to teach the children a song in Portuguese. And we just ran a workshop on why this isn't okay. And the teacher said, no, you can't do that. But his English wasn't very good. So then the woman kept insisting, no, I'm going to teach these kids a song. So the staff member had to go get someone with a higher level of English, and this man kept trying to explain, you can't come in here, you just can't turn up at a school and say, I'm going to teach the kids a song in Portuguese. We don't even teach Portuguese here. And finally he had to take her around to the front of the school to a sign and point at it and angrily say, because it said no visitors without an appointment, he's like, there, you cannot come in. And she got so offended and left.
That's
but
crazy.
there was just this assumption that, it's okay, even though I couldn't do that in my country, but in another country I can go
You'd
in
be
and
furious
do that.
if some random person walked off the street, walked into your kid's classroom and was like, I'm going to teach your kids something. You'd be like, would you like to be arrested?
I'm just thinking the local school I'm quite connected with in my community would be pretty furious if I did that to them. And I was like, I'm going to walk in and I'm going to teach you how to, I don't know, drop some swear words at people. They would be really furious. What an interruption to their learning, and considering that probably happens on a really consistent basis as well. Yeah.
And the only reason that staff member was able to just stand up to her was because the week before we'd done role play where I was the tourist who tried to demand to get into the school. So then they had experience with it with role play.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's really interesting, isn't it, when you put it from one context to another. If someone did that here, we would assume that they would probably have a mental health issue, that there must be something, it's just so not acceptable. Yet why does suddenly it become acceptable in a completely different country? And is just that, I guess in some way, I don't know whether it's racist, but just that privilege of thinking that we know better, that we let us teach you kind of arrogance.
I think it's a hangover from colonization.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. And
Thank
I
you,
used to
Britain.
have the same opinion. Yeah, thank you, Britain. I used to have the same opinion, hey, I know what's best. But we can change our opinions and our point of view, and it's safe to do that. So I encourage everybody just to check themselves and see, hey, what could I change? Don't beat yourself up, but how can I be better at this going forward?
Yes. And Sally, you have a book. What is it called, and where can we greedily get our hands on it?
It's called It's Not About Me, and you can buy it online as a paperback from itsnotaboutmebook.com, and it's also available on Kobo and Apple Books for $10. And all proceeds support our organisation.
I know so many people who probably need to read that book.
Yeah.
Here's your Christmas present.
Yeah. And don't worry, I won't yell at the readers in it. It's just showing my journey and telling
Here's
some
a hint.
No nudge, nudge.
Here's a hint. Don't be an unskilled volunteer going and building a house.
Wow. It's
Oh,
quite
man.
interesting because I know that my partner and I have talked about things like this, and he is a builder,
Mhm.
and he came from New South Wales, and now he's in Perth, and he had it when he started building in Perth. We just had this conversation this morning where people from Perth said to him, "You're from New South Wales, what would you know about building in Perth?" And he was like, "But it's the same country." But yeah, it's really interesting because we have spoken about, you know, in what ways, you know, what are the opportunities to be able to go over and help build, and not to be in charge of anything, but to be of use, you know, to be the workers for somebody else. But there are so many ways I think people do want to give back. So I think what you discuss and how you do it is so beautiful because it really enables us to do it in a way that's not taking away from anyone else. That's not arrogant. That's not obnoxious. It's not ignorant. But that's absolutely soaked with respect. I think that's so absolutely, it's so needed because people do want to do the right thing. I really do believe that most people do want to do the right thing, just that no one's telling us how to do it until now. Until
Yeah.
Sally.
We need a louder voice to compete with all those louder voices of the voluntourism companies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, knowing that this was coming up, I was thinking about voluntourism, and I realized, I remembered that when I was in my very early 20s and like I just finished my diploma in tourism, I kind of went on like I want to read all of the travel books and find all of these things. I have a book still on my bookshelf in my bedroom about voluntourism and how to do it from a very prominent travel company that I'm looking at now and going, this is a bit of a wank and not right. Because it's all of the things where it's like, find a program where you can build the school or build the water well, and it's got suggestions of all the places that you can do it in. And yeah, I mean, it's like 10 years old now, but still, it just makes me go, oh, I very nearly did that.
Yeah.
Glad I didn't now.
Yeah, good
What
on you.
about the program, Sally, as well? You know, when there was that massive tsunami that went through Southeast Asia and Thailand was horrifically affected, and they had an influx of volunteers coming in from around the world to help tidy up and to clear, you know, all the debris. How does that work in with what you do? Like, are there things that people do around that where they're possibly doing it the wrong way as well, or?
Definitely. And I read an article by an expert, because there are experts in disaster relief, and he said that if you are not skilled in disaster relief, stay at home, because you're going to be a hindrance when you're already trying to manage and help all of these people who are dying and displaced, and then to have more people that you have to come in and manage. And that's the exact same thing with bushfires. You don't want to have all of us Aussies to come in and go into the bushfire affected areas when they're still doing the cleanup, unless we do have those skills and unless it's coordinated by somebody. So definitely think twice. That's definitely an instance where your money would be much more impactful.
Yes, and I've heard that a lot as well from, I think we also heard that from Sarah Island, who said, you know, sometimes your money and items are better than you physically being there.
And even
That's
with
amazing.
items, you've got to be careful. And I'm really glad that this year, that was, I think the Premier, Dan Andrews, he said, can you please stop sending items, because we need to be coordinating this. And so many items by well-meaning Australians were being sent to the bushfire zones, but then there was no place to store it. You know, we need to...
Oh, yes, I saw that. And people were donating fridges and washing machines, and there's no homes to put them in. There's no electricity supply to run them.
So that's a great idea to help with that later down the track. But for now, we need to think, you know, listen to the experts, whoever's coordinating the fire relief.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your wisdom on this, because it's, you know, I wouldn't have given a second thought to voluntourism. I've, you know, like a lot of people have it in my head that this is a good thing to do, and, you know, you can just, the marketing is fantastic. It really is very patriarchal, but we never ever hear about the underside of. I mean, I've seen like the odd article here and there over the years, but I've never really heard someone speak directly about this. So it's a real honor to hear everything you've had to say and to sort of shake that up as well, because I wouldn't have given a second thought to it otherwise.
Thank you. I appreciate having the platform to discuss and having people whose opinions are willing to be changed.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I know this conversation.
This will be interesting.
I take this conversation to a lot of people I know who just would never have thought about the other side. And like you said, you go into another culture and community, and you're dealing with children who've already been displaced, who may have been, in high-risk situations, whether there's sexual abuse going on, or I was speaking to a lady in Thailand who was dealing with saving children from the sex trade and from the drug trade. And then you're going in and making these beautiful connections with these young, very vulnerable children, only to walk away, and then that child has a whole lot more damage to have to deal through and sift through and sort through, and having those abandonment issues, being triggered and raised again. We don't think about that stuff. We really need to have much bigger conversations of how we impact these communities that they sort of do have very fragile foundations. We need to be so careful of how we literally, metaphorically, walk through them and how we behave and interact with them, and that we leave behind a footprint that empowers them.
Yeah, I mean, it's the exact same as having a trigger warning when we view content here. If only they had their own trigger warning so they could be able to say, no, this is going to do more harm than good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, if you want to continue this conversation, head over to our Facebook page and be part of the revolution. You can find us at Good Girls Don't Podcast on Facebook. Please note we cannot create change alone. Your support, likes, comments, shares, and iTunes reviews help us give a voice to the insanely inspirational women and the controversial issues that we discuss.
If you'd like to be a part of our podcast, or if you have an issue that you have a burning desire for us to bring into the light, please contact us. With fierceness, Ashley
and Verity.
Get ready for the rain.